the restoration of the priesthood is just as relevant to you as a woman.
I think it's important for us to start kind of taking hold of our own culture. In many ways, women have always presided over handing moral values and culture down from one generation to the next. And I think when you see this messaging, you'll be really startled, because we were warned by Kimball and then again by Russel M Nelson. If the world loses the moral rectitude of its women, the world will never recover. And I think it's our responsibility as women in this generation and men who see this problem. I've had a lot of really encouraging emails from you guys and messages on the last couple of videos I've made on feminism saying, I've seen this, I've been worried about this. You have been given the gift of discernment. We are seeing these problematic views, and I think it's time for us to start recognizing that these are not messages that are coming from God. They are coming from the adversary. When you ask, why are women in general so much less religious than their male counterparts in the last decade? It's because there has been a real targeting of women by the media, imposing these very toxic feminist ideas on Instagram and social media and TikTok. And sometimes women in our own cultures, in our own Christian cultures, are absorbing these ideas and they don't even know it. And we're going to spend a lot of time on those media messages, debunking and rebuttaling against those feminist media messages, because it's important that we make the case for the gospel. So this is the graph that I wanted to show you. You can see that the data ends around 23, 24 timeframe, but that's when the data was kind of accumulated, and they've since said that they feel like the trend has started slow kind of regressing and that people are coming back to church post-COVID. But that being said, from the period of 2007 to 2023, there's really been an eclipse of male to female membership in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to the point where there is a number of young men and men who have increased their member participation in the church, and women have decreased their member participation in the church. You can see that in the third column here for 23, 24. You can see how men have increased by like 13% and women have decreased by maybe 6-7%. It's still worth asking, why is this the case? I'm going to make an argument where I think that there are some channels that have followed this who have made their own personal speculations. I think they're wrong. If you come to some channels I've seen recently, this channel by Mormon Stories, which is an anti-Mormon podcast, they make basically every feminist trope argument in the book, saying like, if women had, women are second-class citizens, if women were listened to more, if women had more status in the church, that the church would be doing better. And you can look at my previous video about why women don't run the church to show that I really debunk that argument, that if you gave women the priesthood, then the Church of England would be doing so well in its membership because they gave women high status priesthood leadership roles. And what happened was their membership tanked, and it also led to fertility tanking, and it totally led to the women of that church being completely burnt out and the men being demoralized. You can check out one of my other videos that I did that was received pretty well, and I'm really grateful for that, called The Rise and Fall of LDS Feminism. As I've noticed, having grown up in New England, that where I was exposed to a lot of feminist arguments at a young age, because the New England states are really feministy, but I was always exposed to those arguments from this perspective of, oh, this is the world saying these things, but we don't believe these things. And I've noticed in recent years, in the last 10 years, women like Kate Kelly, Julie Hanks, Haley Raleigh, she runs the Girls Camp podcast, and Elyssa Grenfell, who is not LDS anymore, but still has a huge influence over like a Mormon population. All of these women are making the same exact feminist arguments that more secular people in the 90s were making. They're just now making it to an LDS audience. I think the most interesting trend that you look at when you ask, why are women in general so much less religious than their male counterparts in the last decade, is when you look at a Gallup poll study, which shows that the male-female gender gap in ideology has very much shifted, that men are staying about the same or becoming slightly more conservative and traditional in their views, but women in their liberal views have absolutely skyrocketed. Now, like in the 90s, I don't think there was a really big difference. I grew up in a very liberal state, but the differences between liberals and conservatives in the 90s weren't that social. They were more like, how do we spend the deficit? Maybe differences about war. They weren't social issues. But in the last 8 years, 6 to 8 years, the differences between liberal and conservative ideas are very social. One might even say they're very moral. So in this article by Gallup, it says that U.S. women have become more liberal and men mostly stable. And what they mean is that most women of all ages have started to identify as more liberal, and men have stayed mostly stable, with young men identifying as more traditional / conservative in the last 6 to 8 years. So if you're looking for an explanation as to why you're seeing a shift of young women away from the church, of religion in general, that's the answer. It's that in general, our society for women has shifted so much more liberal. And some of the tenets of liberalism are these feminist ideas. Now, obviously, when we say the word feminism, I think one of the problems we all run into is, what are we talking about when we even say feminism? We may not necessarily be talking about the same thing. And so I want to define that for us here, because sometimes people will describe feminism as I want more education, but there are some actual clear feminist ideologies that do contradict directly with the family proclamation, with the doctrine and beliefs of the plan of salvation, and the beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I've noticed that every single message that I hear in the media, on Instagram, on TikTok, that is targeting LDS women, that comes from Kate Kelly, comes from Julie Hanks, that comes from Haley Raleigh or Elyssa Grenfell, falls into these 3 feminist messages. And for sake of background, when I worked at the U.S. Embassy in Iraq for 3 years, and I was actually a media analyst. I was an Arabic and Pan-Arab media analyst, and my job was to go read all of the media being that would have been on radio, television, newspapers, that any person reading Arabic in the Arab world would have read, and then distill that media down into like core messages so that we could figure out, how is the Arab world perceiving the U.S.? How is the Arab world perceiving the U.S. military? Ironically, I took that same skill. It's funny how God kind of works in your life, because I never would have imagined that skill would apply to this channel. But I can see so clearly the main messages coming out of the feminist camp that are destructive to LDS testimonies. And I'm going to break those 3 points down. These are the main messages. And I'm going to refer back to this a ton. We're going to look at media in the future, in future videos. We're going to look at all this Instagram media, and we're going to see how these ideas, if LDS women embrace them, it 100% will be destructive to their testimony. It's important to understand that feminism and liberalism is being marketed to women everywhere. And I have heard women who will say, it's important to identify the beliefs. Because I have heard women who say, oh, I'm not a feminist, and they would identify themselves as a traditional conservative woman. And I would look at them and say, they're definitely traditional. They have 5 or 6 kids. And then they will proceed to parrot off feminist beliefs. And they don't understand how ingrained these beliefs have come in our culture. That's why I think it's important for us to start kind of taking hold of our own culture. In many ways, women have always presided over handing moral values and culture down from one generation to the next. And I think when you see this messaging, you'll be really startled, because we were warned by Kimball and then again by Russel M Nelson, if the world loses the moral rectitude of its women, the world will never recover. And I think it's our responsibility as women in this generation, and men, who see this problem. I've had a lot of really encouraging emails from you guys and messages on the last couple of videos I've made on feminism saying, I've seen this, I've been worried about this. You have been given the gift of discernment. We are seeing these problematic views, and I think it's time for us to start recognizing that these are not messages that are coming from God. They are coming from the adversary. Okay, so these are the three main media messages that define a feminism that has gone too far, right? Some feminism maybe was helpful in balancing out our culture, getting women the right to vote, getting women access to education and property rights and marriage rights and those kinds of things. But there's a point where feminism became toxic and became destructive to relationships, to family, to culture, to communities. A lot of these are based in Karl Marx theories. In his chapter in the Communist Manifesto, he said that he aspired to the abolition of the family. So if you look at modern media, you will meet women I can categorize every single woman that I find who criticizes the church will fall into these three main categories of feminist belief that they've embraced. The first message that I really see on Instagram is that family life is bad for women. And I will show you a clip at another time of a basic feminist laying out the argument why becoming a mother and being married is actually bad for women's health. So that's the first argument is, that family life in general is just bad for women. And they're kind of generic with that so that they can fill that gap in. Marriage is bad for women, having kids is bad for women, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, the second point is that having children holds women back from their potential. I was not aware of these first two being so palpably part of our LDS culture, having entered our LDS culture until I was a young women's president during the COVID era. And I was around a lot of young women in our stake from really good families. Like North Carolina is doing a really good job with the church, with sharing the gospel, with living the gospel, and raising some really beautiful families. Frankly, I feel so lucky to live here. But I was encountering all these young women who had this fear of marriage and this disdain for motherhood. I'm like, where is this coming from? And then when you look on TikTok or you look on Instagram, which are still predominantly female spaces, the narrative around family life is very, very negative. And there are times as well where I would hear women at church who would parrot these same messages to girls, being like, oh, be careful when you get married. Don't get married too fast because you want to travel because it's so hard. And I remember thinking, even though I got married a little later, I got married when I was 26, and I also had gotten advanced degrees. Even though I had done all those things, I had always been encouraged to not sacrifice family life for those things. And I was like, if we suddenly start telling these young women to deprioritize family life, they're going to. So point number one, these are media messages, feminist media messages. And every criticism of the church that comes from women can be categorized into these three main feminist or liberal categorizations. Family life is bad for women. It's unhealthy for them. It takes advantage of them. Point number two, having children holds women back from their potential. Maybe they won't be able to travel or get a degree, or it limits their career, et cetera, et cetera. And the final thing, which is where you really get people unloading on the church structure being oppressive to women, is that institutions with men unfairly benefit men and take advantage of women. Okay, so when I say institutions, I mean the church or marriage. Women in the feminist online movement will always cite this one statistic that men who are married live longer, and women who are married don't get that same health benefit. And the point they're trying to make is that marriage only benefits men. And this is an argument that I see as well in this new glamorized narrative of, divorce is this act of empowerment. And you wait, you're going to see Julie Hanks pull this out of a hat. Divorce is actually an act of empowerment because men are always trying to unfairly take advantage of women, and the institution of marriage shouldn't be trusted. This is very much affecting every Christian church in the United States is being affected by this argument because women are embracing divorce like it's an act of liberation, when the reality is that children of divorce are 4 times more likely to be wanting to delete themselves, I guess is the word I'll use, and they're 5 times more likely to have depression. So divorce is not a good decision for your children. And the other point, right, institutions with men unfairly benefit men and take advantage of women. When that comes to the church, it's an obvious point, right? And you see this with I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Women on the Stand movement. It was these women who kind of felt like they came out of California, unsurprisingly, felt like women should be allowed to sit up on the stand. And their point was they used the phrase, "We do the labor, we should be recognized." That is a phrase. Free labor, unpaid labor, is a phrase from Karl Marx's book, The Communist Manifesto, where it talks about how the abolition of the family needs to happen because women being unpaid labor in the family are taken advantage of, which is funny because I would have just called that love, right? I would have said, I work, my husband works because he works for money, yes, but he works because because he loves us. He's trying to take care of his family. And I work hard in my home, not because I'm being taken advantage of, but because I love my children and I want to give them a great life. And so these are helpful in defining what we're talking about when we're talking about toxic feminism that has gone too far and is now very much degrading, and it's hurting the testimonies of young women. And I have been very surprised to see women, I call them late in life feminists. I think they're women who've largely in part been raised in LDS communities, and they are bombarded in their 40s and 50s with these messages on Instagram predominantly, and they haven't ever thought of pushback or rebuttals. They've never thought about pushing back on that. So those are my insights. Hopefully you've learned in this video why women in general are walking away from all religion, not just the LDS religion, is because there has been a real targeting of women by the media, imposing these very toxic feminist ideas on Instagram and social media and TikTok. And sometimes women in our own cultures, in our own Christian cultures, are absorbing these ideas and they don't even know it. And we're going to spend a lot of time on those media messages, debunking and rebuttaling against those feminist media messages, because it's important that we make the case for the gospel. I think it's interesting that, I have no desire to I'm critical of some of these people, but I don't want to emotionally decapitate them, right? Like, they're people. I want to criticize their arguments. And one of the scriptures that stands out in my mind is how blessed upon the mountains are those that publish peace. The gospel of Jesus Christ is a message of peace. And one of the things that we believe in at our core is family life. We believe in marriage. We believe in having children. And so we should make the case against anything that is opposing that. We should make the case against divorce. We should make the case against, child-free and single lifestyles. We should make the case that says that institutions in the church are sexist towards women, when they are really just a fabulous divide and conquer strategy that Jesus Christ put on earth to help us proclaim the gospel and also raise up the next generation of righteous children. I'm so grateful you guys are here. I really am so grateful. I feel like I have the best subscribers. You teach me so much, and I'm always grateful for the testimonies that people are willing to bear in the comment section, the stories people are willing to bear. If you're willing to share as well any stories, personal stories of friends you've had who you feel like are absorbing this feministy belief system, it's so helpful for me to know what you're experiencing so that I can tailor these discussions together. I really do see this as more of like a brainstorming session. It's like a group of us who are really interested in priesthood power. We're interested in making sure that men and women continue to work together and they're not pitting each other against each other. And that's maybe one of the saddest aspects of feminism, is it always leads women to see men and children as their enemy. And it causes women to withdraw more and more and more, which is unsurprising that Kate Kelly is now in a lesbian marriage and Julie Hanks has filed for divorce and is going to go do a solo career. Like, it's antithetical to a happy family life. And that is why on this channel, we're going to make the case against it, and we're going to make the case for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Anyway, You guys are awesome. I feel so lucky that you even listened to me, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.
The restoration of the priesthood is just as relevant to you as a woman.